Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the regular meeting of the City Planning Commission for Monday, July 31st, 2021. My name is Alyssa Olson, and I am the president of the Planning Commission. The city will be recording and posting this meeting to the city's website and YouTube channel as a means of increasing public access and transparency. This meeting is public and subject to the Minnesota Open Meeting Law. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Okay, Commissioner Alper.
Present.
Commissioner Baxley is absent. Commissioner Campbell.
Here.
Commissioner Conley is absent. Commissioner Emmerich.
Here.
Commissioner Ford.
Here.
Commissioner Koski is absent. Commissioner Marwa is absent. Commissioner Meyer.
Here.
And Chair Olson. Here. We have 6 members present.
All right, we have a quorum. With that, we'll proceed to the agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov, and there are copies by the clerk. We'll begin with acceptance of the minutes from July 17th. Could I have a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion passes and the minutes have been adopted. Our next order of business is to organize our public hearing agenda for the evening, which again is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. I'm going to read through the items on our agenda and state whether they're slated for consent or discussion. Consent items will be passed by the board without discussion. So if you agree with the staff recommendation for an item, you don't need to do anything. But if I read off an item and you disagree with the staff recommendation and would like to speak on that item, you can just raise your hand or say something, and we'll put that item on our discussion agenda. All right, so with that, we have the following items on our agenda for this evening. Item number 4 is 2648 Marshall Street Northeast. We will discuss item number 4. Item number 5 is 625 through 751 Van Buren Street Northeast and 901 Sumner Street Northeast. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Is there anyone here to speak against staff recommendation on item number 5? Okay, we will discuss item 5. Item number 6 is 1500 Jackson Street Northeast. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Is there anyone here to speak against staff recommendation for item 6? Seeing none, we'll put item 6 on consent. Item number 7 is 1201 through 1318 Jackson Street Northeast and 807 Broadway Street Northeast. We will be discussing item 7. Item number 8 is 900 20th Avenue South. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Is there anyone here to speak against staff recommendation for item 8? Okay, we'll discuss item 8. Item number 9 is 2432 Chicago Avenue, and we will discuss item number 9. And item number 10 is 1407 Nicollet Avenue. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Is there anyone here to speak against staff recommendation for item 10? Right, seeing none, we'll put item 10 on consent. So to review, we have items 6 and 10 on consent, and we will discuss items 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9. Yep. Mm-hmm. We're going to discuss that item, so we will. Right, and when we get to that item, you'll have the chance to come up and talk about it. Thank you. Okay, so items 6 and 10 on consent, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9 on discussion. Commissioners, is there any discussion or could I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion passes, so the agenda has been adopted. We'll move on to our consent agenda. So that is for items 6 or 10. So if you are here and would like to say anything about items 6 or 10, I'll open the public hearing. You can come up to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the address for the record, and proceed with your comments. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone, so I will close the public hearing for the consent agenda. Commissioners, can I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion passes. So if you were here for items 6 or 10, those items have been completed. Good luck. All right, so we will move on to our first discussion item. Just so you guys know, when we open up our discussion items for public hearing, everyone will have 2 minutes to speak on those items. We will have a timer out that will show you how much time you have, and it'll count down, so prepare your remarks accordingly. And staff is Lindsay Silas.
Good evening, President Olson, members of the commission. The project in front of you is 2648 Marshall Street Northeast. You may remember this from a project that came through in 2021, and this is very substantially similar to the project that was evaluated at that time. And I'll get more to that in a second. So the site is located along the east bank of the Mississippi River. It's over 20,000 square feet in size. The site has a duplex along Marshall Street and a detached garage closer to the rear of the site. The applicant has applied for 3 applications in order to establish a new cluster development on the site, which would consist of 3 dwelling units. The existing duplex would account for 2 of those dwelling units, and 1 new single unit would be constructed at the rear of the site, as well as a new detached garage and workshop. In 2021, the applicant submitted identical or almost identical plans to be evaluated by the Planning Commission. At that time, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the applicant's application, and there was an appeal that went to the City Council. The application was denied upon appeal. So we allow applicants to resubmit applications as long as at least a year has passed since the previous application. And as you all are aware, there have been city council elections and a new zoning code adopted in that time. So some things have changed since the application was reviewed in 2021. So this site is a unique site, and we have some sites throughout the city that contain underlying dedication for parks. The properties to the north and south, here I'll get to a site plan, are the properties to the north and south of the site also are designated for parks, and Marshall Terrace Park is located just 1 parcel beyond the adjacent parcel. And so there is kind of a long-term vision for the park board to acquire this land. The park board does not presently own the land on either side of the site, and the designation granted under the land use rezoning study was PR1. This application was deemed complete prior to July 1st, so it's being evaluated under the old code. In PR1, there's no restriction on number of principal residential structures on a site, so the cluster development application would not have been required if submitted after July 1st. So the applications at hand are a CUP for a cluster development a cluster development of 3 units, and then variances to the Shoreland Overlay District and Mississippi River Corridor Critical Area Overlay District. Those are almost overlapping requirements where there are structure setback requirements because from steep slopes and tops of steep slopes in the shoreland and the bluff and bluff impact zone in the MRCA. So here's the applicant's site plan. You can see the existing duplex, 3 surface parking stalls proposed at the rear of the duplex, the garage, and then the new structure, which is proposed to be a single-story residential structure that will not have a basement and is just 1 level. So the applicant submitted this kind of shade diagram, so you can kind of see where the outline of their new proposed structure is, and then where the top of the slope in the shoreland, and then the slope setbacks would fall on the site. Also, just worth noting is the applicant also submitted these historic photos of the site. So you'll note that the neighboring property to the north is a large multifamily dwelling, and to the south there's an industrial use, which is concrete crushing. So this is a very unique parcel kind of nestled between these two high-intensity uses. And so these historic photos from 1967 through 1974 show that there have been a variety of different kind of driveway and maneuvering areas and docks and things on the site and historically. In addition, the existing site, the detached garage, is located kind of right at the top of the steep slope or bluff. So here's just a couple of renderings of the proposed structure. So as I noted before, staff recommended approval in 2021. Staff is recommending approval today of all applications. For the conditional use permit, the applicant has proposed kind of the shared space for the residents, and if submitted after July 1st, a conditional use permit would not be required to establish two principal dwelling structures on the site. When it comes to the variances, so the applicant has proposed to locate the structure on the slope and on top of the steep slope, so that is what has triggered these two variances. And just as a note, staff had initially not triggered the MERCA variance with the misunderstanding of how the slopes were calculated, and after contact from the DNR National Park Service, we had a meeting with the DNR and discussed with them that we should have triggered the MERCA. And as we had in 2021, so that is why the application was continued one cycle. Staff has evaluated the proposed variances and finds that the structure, so while this is a long site, the various slope, bluff line, and structure setbacks result in eliminating 46% of the buildable area as measured from the riverfront. And that's only that structure setback. That's not accounting for other side yard and front yard setback requirements. So, the finding for a difficult variance is that a practical difficulty exists in complying with the ordinance due to circumstances unique to the property. So the bluff line on the site really does cut into the site much more than neighboring properties. And as I noted, the neighboring properties are intensive uses, a high-density residential structure, and an industrial use. But even if you look farther north to Marshall Terrace Park, the bluff line is located much closer to the river. So if that wasn't a park and it was a single-family site, there would not be such great structure setbacks when measured from the ordinary high water line. So staff has found that the compliance with the various structure setbacks really does significantly reduce the buildable area of the site and constitutes a practical difficulty in line with what we look for this finding. In addition, staff finds that the proposal is reasonable and it's not going to have any negative impacts on public health or surrounding properties. Those historic photos and the use on the site today indicate that there have been various uses of this slope and bluff line over time with parking and maneuvering areas, and the applicant has proposed to do some mitigation on the site, adding native plantings, removing some concrete debris that has been on the site since for a long time due to the neighboring industrial use. The proposed setback from the ordinary high water line is 96 feet, and they are proposing some construction methods to mitigate the impact. There's no basement, that sort of thing. So staff is recommending the approval of the conditional use permit and the two variances, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. Are there any questions for staff? Commissioner Alber.
Thank you for this background. I am wondering if you could give us a little background with the MRCCA. When was it adopted? What's the purpose of it?
That is a great question. I believe the city of Minneapolis was one of the first cities to adopt the MERCA, from state law to kind of implement that at the local level. Kimberly, I don't know if you know the year. I do remember that when this came through in 2021, this was one of the first variances that we analyzed through the MERCA.
I can look up the exact date.
Oh, that's
It's
okay.
relatively new, but yes, it's one of those ordinances where a draft ordinance is provided by the DNR. The city worked with them extensively over several years to model our ordinance. After that, we did so, and Jim Vole is here, who also worked on it 2019, 2020, maybe. We can give you an exact date if that's
great. That's
necessary.
Great. It applied to the project previously also.
Sure.
And the purpose of it, am I correct in saying that there should be no construction within the bluff impact zone and that there's a 40-foot setback? Like, could you describe what? it
Yeah,
entails?
well, so if you just think about kind of like the zoning code as a whole, right? Like variances, any type of variances are just variations from what the code allows. So the MRCA is a very complex ordinance that really manages kind of where structures can be placed, accessory to steep slopes and the water. I can read to you this, that the MRCCA regulations are in place to regulate the subdivision, use, and development of designated critical areas, and thus preserve and enhance the quality of important historic, cultural, aesthetic values, and natural systems, and provide for the wise use of these areas. So, so yes, the structure setbacks are in place to prohibit development on steep slopes or bluffs. And that is a prohibition, right? So that's why we need the variance. And then,
By the Mississippi River, right?
what was that?
By the Mississippi River, that's the focus, right? I'm just.
Right, yes,
Okay.
yep. The MRCA district kind of runs with the Mississippi River and is guided by state statute, and so then local jurisdictions that have properties that border the Mississippi River have all adopted local ordinances to implement the MRCA.
Great. And then the Shoreland overlay district, can you tell me about that too?
Yeah, so, both of these ordinances, there is a lot of overlap between them. That was kind of one of the discussions with DNR, is whether we can kind of simplify the ordinance to not have this kind of duplication potentially in the future. But that is also to kind of manage the potential impacts of like soil erosion and implications on like native plantings and natural areas that might be near shorelands.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Meyer?
Yeah, just building off that. So if we were to approve one variance and not the other, like how much difference is there between them? So like, suppose we were to approve the shoreline overlay ordinance, but not the MRCO one, like what things would they be able to do that they wouldn't be able to do if, or what wouldn't they be able to do if we didn't approve both?
Yeah, so I think in this case, the shoreline is actually the more conservative ordinance because it requires 40 feet to be set back from the top of the steep slope, whereas the MRCA bluff setback is 20 feet. So, if you only approved the MRCA variance, then they could, they would have to comply with that 20-foot setback from the bluff area. In our discussions with the DNR, the bluff may not cover the entire site. It has to do with kind of the slope over time, and so it's really maybe just the kind of interior portions of the site that actually have a bluff line on them. So it's probably a conversation, if that was the way the commission wanted to go, that we would want to have the applicant surveyor really kind of come up with different modeling to show where the bluff end exists, and then to be able to measure the 20 feet back from that. But so basically, if the shoreland overlay, since the shoreland overlay setbacks are more conservative, if that one theoretically were approved, but then the MRCA one was not approved, then there would be a 20-foot difference in terms of placement relative to the top of the slope and the river.
And then one more, what would be the impact if we denied both the MRCA and shoreland variances, but approved the conditional use permit, since that's something that would be approved now if they reapplied anyway? So would that be possible with the conditional use permit as they currently applied?
So my inclination is that there is no reason to have a conditional use permit on the site when they could just resubmit a new application that would just be allowed, right? So if the variances were denied, the applicant's gonna have to do significant revision to the plan to move the structure. And so they would be able to, if they were complying with the variances, they would be able to then just resubmit for an administrative review for a new one-unit residential structure, and that would be administratively reviewed, and it would not need another public hearing. So my guess would be that there would probably be, the restrictions on needing to record the conditional use permit with the county may make that not very appealing if the applicant could just submit as, they would have to anyway with a new structure that is in a different space on the lot.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ford, did you have a? Okay, yeah, that's fine. Commissioner Alper?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right time or not, but I guess, we have a letter in our packet from the National Park Service that recommends denial of the Mississippi, I can never say this name of this, MERCA variance, and I'm wondering, they say there are no practical difficulties, so, but staff has come to a different conclusion from the city. Can you explain the discrepancy?
Sure, yeah, so it's possible that staff from the National Park Service and DNR are kind of evaluating practical difficulties under a different lens, right? Like when we're implementing the adopted zoning code from the city of Minneapolis, we kind of apply a practical difficulty lens equally to any application. We're not saying that there's no possible development on the site at all without granting the variances. We're saying that there is a unique circumstance on the site that is significantly restricting the buildable area. That is unique to the site, even when you look at the bluff line to the north and south of the river. And that is unique, and that's kind of the standard that we apply to any variance. Is there something unique that is we're not gonna see this at dozens of sites throughout Minneapolis. It's unique to this site, this particular place that is causing, a challenge in complying with the ordinance. And that's what staff found here. And so, DNR staff, NPS staff, they are experts in many different things than city staff is. And we were fortunate to have been able to meet with them and kind of learn a little bit more about the MERCA recently. But when we're looking at the practical difficulty finding is the same for a variance in the MERCA and in the shoreland as it would be for any variance that would be applied throughout the city of Minneapolis, a setback variance, that sort of thing. So, is there something causing the situation that is unique and putting pressure on the applicant that is above and beyond what we would expect on other sites?
Kimberly?
I also just want to clarify along those lines, the city of Minneapolis is charged with implementing and administering the MERCA ordinance within the city limits. So the DNR and the National Park Service have both commented, as any other member of the public could, and certainly it's up to you how much weight you want to give to those comments, and I believe we have someone present tonight who will testify to the letter that's included in your packets. But ultimately, it's up to the city to administer this ordinance. We cannot defer to the National Park Service or the DNR to implement our own MERCA regulations.
Any other questions? I don't see any. Thank you, Lindsay. I'll open the public hearing for this item. Is the applicant here, and would they like to come speak? Please come forward. State your name and neighborhood for the record and proceed with your comments.
Yes, I'm Andy Wattenhofer. I'm the property owner from the Marshall Terrace neighborhood. First, could I get clarification? I was under the impression that the setback requirement in the MRCCA ordinance is actually 20 feet from what is called the bluff impact zone, which itself is a 20-foot zone from the top of the bluff. So if that is the case, I believe that would make the setback requirements identical between the two ordinances. Is there a way we can verify that?
Lindsay, do you want to just? Yeah, get back to us. All right.
So, and am I capped at 2 minutes for my comment? Okay. As staff indicated, this is a resubmission of a plan from 2022 that was approved by the Planning Commission and then overturned on appeal, with the finding of fact being that we had failed to substantiate that development had occurred on the slope in this location. So what we've done in this resubmission is to include the information to substantiate that case. And so I'd like to talk about 3 topics. The first being the history of development that's occurred on this site as it plays into the practical difficulty. And then I would like to speak to our compliance with the requirements for variance in the ordinances, and finally speak to the park future that we have planned for this property. So on that first topic of development, there has been a history on the riverward side, the riverward slope on this property, and the property to the north and the south, of development that has significantly altered the composition of the slope here and the shape of it. At the property to the north, there has been retaining walls that have been built up and out to the Mississippi River at these locations, such that they rise 20 feet above the level of the water at those locations and dominate any riverward views in those places. On our property, there has been the addition of this driveway that has been paved from Marshall Street all the way down to the river. There's a vehicle storage pad that's been paved about 40 feet by 30 feet in size that's roughly midway up the slope. And then in the river, down at the river itself, there's been a retaining wall structure that has been built out into the river for the purpose of docking watercraft. And then if we move up the slope from that location, there's another retaining wall that's been built there that is roughly 2/3 the width of the property. And then continuing up the slope from there, yet another retaining wall that has been constructed parallel to where the driveway runs. These 2 last retaining walls sort of form a boxed area that has been filled in with chunks of concrete waste material that was typically brought into these locations to build up the usable area on them. And I expect that what the material that is in this built-up area is the same stuff that was used to build up what is now the parking lot for the apartment building to the north. And so, as far as I can tell, the point of this sort of built-up area is, 1, to contain that material, and 2, to support that retaining wall structure that forms that parking lot, such that it cannot come in and cave into the property. And so you can see that there's a lot of concrete on this location. It doesn't, because of that, it's not able to support much of what we would value in terms of natural amenities. It's mostly just sparse vegetation, small diameter trees, most of them these non-native Siberian elm species, the sorts of things that are able to make a go of it in the cracks and crevices in concrete. And so when we were looking at the design in choosing this location, we decided that this is probably the best location on that sort of built-up retaining wall structure, for the fact that, number 1, there's already a building there, there's already a garage there, so we're not proposing a new use for that part of the lot. It's keeping with the original use in that location. And second, because that place is not able to support a natural use in its current condition without significant alteration, to remove concrete material and establish native plants, let's say, And so if we're to start removing material, unfortunately, that creates a condition where we need significant engineering work to reinforce that wall so that it doesn't want to come down. And so that, in our opinion, makes this the best location on the property to locate a new structure, largely because the alternative now, when we talk about the practical difficulty in locating structures here, if we look at the setback requirements of the ordinances, as staff indicated, that does reduce the buildable area on this property by almost half. It also forces the location of any structures here to be in what is the last remaining green space on this property. So that is the yard that's behind the current duplex, and we would locate a building in there. These factors together then create additional difficulties in complying with requirements for for impervious surfaces, around impervious surfaces in the ordinances. They are, the first of those being the impervious surface coverage on the lot, which is limited to 60% of the lot coverage. The house that we're proposing is roughly 8% of the total size of the lot. It's not a big house at 1,674 square feet. We deliberately chosen a smaller design. So when we add that house to the behind the bluff setback, we increase the impervious surface coverage to above 60% in that location on this property. The second difficulty we run into is with cluster developments where we cannot meet the requirements for non-impervious surface in the common area for the two dwelling units, where there's a limit of 50% of coverage for parking and driveway uses. We simply cannot comply with that given the tightness of space in this area. And then the last one is probably the one that's most important to me, and this is where I like to introduce myself as a Minnesota water steward, which is a certification program administered by the Freshwater Society. And in that role, I am an advocate for issues around water quality in the freshwater bodies in the state of Minnesota, including the Mississippi River. I know that through that role, that when we have all of these impervious surfaces, they cause problems with stormwater runoff into the Mississippi River. Those waters bring with them, pick up sediments and pollution from cars and roofs, and wash it right into the Mississippi River, especially at a location like this, where there is so much impervious surface, and there's a literal conduit in the form of a driveway that runs down to the river. I think the problem is exacerbated by the fact that the neighboring properties also have these problems. The apartment building to the north has mostly impervious coverage. It's a big apartment building and then a big parking lot. And there's not really much space to channel water in there. And so most of it ends up running down the side yard, down the parking lot, and directly into the river. And then, of course, with on the south side of the lot, we have the concrete factory. That is nearly 100% concrete surface there. It's a big funnel of stormwater into the Mississippi River. And so my aim is to not only deal with the stormwater runoff that we generate through this development project, but also to hopefully be able to sequester or handle more of the stormwater over what the current conditions are on the property. And those stormwater structures that we would have to put in place, those are also required by the ordinance. And so I would further note that locating those structures, let's say on the riverward side of the slope itself, would require a variance. And so that is not a solution. And taking any of these three, any single one of these three difficulties with impervious surface I think we could easily say that these can easily be mitigated, that there's a solution or a workaround for every one of them. It's the combination of the three that is really insurmountable here. There's just not enough space to change it. So for example, the example where we, instead of doing a single-story family, we choose a single-story dwelling, we choose something that is 2 levels with a smaller footprint. That might solve the impervious surface coverage problem. It does not solve all of those problems. So that is our practical difficulty. Now I want to speak about the compliance with the conditions for variance in the ordinances, starting with the Shoreland Ordinance. The Shoreland Overlay has 4 requirements for variance. The first of which is easy. It requires that there's development currently existing on the slope. I believe we've shown that. There's a garage there. There are retaining wall structures there. The second is that the foundation and underlying materials shall be adequate for the slope condition and soil type. The slope condition and soil type for most of this property is concrete and dirt. And so as I've talked about being careful not to disrupt that slope, the design we've actually picked for the house is a single story with no basement, because excavating to put a basement in there would actually disrupt that slope. And so we have a system that builds the house on piers instead. And so there's no disruption of the slope in that case. The third requirement is that the development shall present no danger of falling rock, mud, uprooted trees, or other materials. I think that one is self-evident that we are compliant with that. There isn't really much that can be done to cause those harms. And the fourth point is that the view from the developed slope from the protected water shall be consistent with the natural appearance of the slope, any historic areas, and with the surrounding physical context. On the first matter, the natural appearance of the slope is debatable, I think, because as I've indicated, I think multiple times, this is not really a natural looking slope. It has been heavily modified. There is a lot of concrete on site. And so, and then we have the situation with those neighboring retaining walls that are built up to the river's edge that truly do dominate any riverward views here. And so I would say that we're compliant in the sense that there isn't much natural appearance to be had here. And we would actually like to, with the approvals, also move forward on improving on those conditions. So we're compliant on that. There are no historic areas that I don't think that have been identified here, so we don't have to concern with that one. And then the surrounding physical context, I think that we're doing a good job of actually complying with that, because we're placing a structure in between these big neighboring retaining walls and all this development. It's a single story, it sets in there, it does not tower above anything. And so I think we're compliant in that part too. And so that is the requirements for variance in the Shoreland Overlay. And then I would move to the MRCCA requirements. As it reads, we must consider the potential impacts of variances on primary conservation areas, public river corridor views, and other resources identified in the MRCCA plan. When we're talking about primary conservation areas, that's the, at this location, in this context, would be the bluff impact zone. And that's where we have that bluff line identified at the top of the slope, and then from there, I believe 20 feet on either side of that forms a strip that's considered the bluff impact zone. And then what I understand is that the setback requirement is actually 20 more feet from that, so it totals 40, if we can have that clarified. And so in this case, as I've already indicated, that area already includes a lot of development, pavement, retaining walls, those sorts of things. And so insofar as we can affect that property, that part of the property adversely or cause any negative effects there, impacts, I believe that damage has already been done on this property, and there's not really much more that we can do to make it worse. We're actually seeking to improve upon those conditions. And so I don't believe that there's much that we would be violating if we talk about preserving that on the topic of preservation of that primary conservation area. Public river corridor views, I've already spoken to that point. I don't believe there's really a lot of view to be had here. And so, again, we can't really cause further harm. We can really only improve upon that. And then finally, the other resources identified in the MRCCA plan, those are things like native plants, substantial vegetation stands, and natural bluffs, natural slopes. Those things, again, as I've demonstrated, don't really exist at this location in any substantive form that we would consider valuable. And I would also point out that the enforcement, the strict enforcement of the bluff setbacks here would have the opposite of the intended effect, in that it would be protecting the existing conditions, the existing unnatural conditions. And that gets me to the intent, the purpose and intent of the MRCCA ordinance as it is written, is to protect those kinds of features from development, to protect the slope from development that would cause landslides or collapse of the slope, to protect any native plantings. And those conditions don't exist in any substantive form in this property. So I believe that we are keeping with the intent and purpose of the ordinance by not causing further harm to those things.
If you could wrap up.
Yes,
you.
I'm sorry, I am nearing completion. I just want on the last point to speak of the park future that we've planned for this, because I know it is something that's on people's minds, especially because it is part of the Minneapolis 2040 Comprehensive Plan that designates this place as a park. That is something that my wife Dawn and I, as the property owners, have considered deeply because we agree with that outcome. We believe that this place should be a park. And the other part of the consideration for us, though, is when do we believe that it is possible for this to become a park? And that is where we look at the trajectory of development that's already occurred along the riverfront here. Starting with the Shearer Brothers lumber site, which I believe was announced, the acquisition was announced in 2010. And it's just now 13 years later that we're starting to see the development of that into a park. Applying that sort of development scope to the rest of, as we move up the river, we see that there are acquisitions that have happened in the intervening years, but there's still no new developments of parks in there. And that's because, as we've talked to the park board about this, they've indicated that they can't actually make parks out of these properties without some kind of contingent other properties so that there's enough space for a park there. So that we believe that the best case scenario really where this could start transitioning into an actual park is 30 or more years, and we believe that's being optimistic. And so noting that there's a concrete factory on one side of the property and there's a productive apartment building on the other side. So with that in mind, we're looking at transitioning this property on that time frame. And we have been in touch with the park board staff on doing that, on starting to look at when and how that might be accomplished. But in the interim, we believe that we can make productive use of this property. We can add housing, and that we've come up with the best case of balancing all of the stakeholder needs in this case for the city, for the river, by improving the environmental qualities, characteristics on the site, and for the city in improving a property, adding housing, and increasing the tax base. And then, of course, for us to be able to have a place to live as we age safely. That is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant before we move on? I don't see any. Oh, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for coming to speak before us today. Is this potential transition to Parkland, has that been signed, approved? Is that a done deal?
You're with the park board, is
Yes.
that correct? Okay, so the process is, the way that works, and we've been talking with Adam Arvidsson, who I believe might have talked to you. The way that process works is that we have to enter into formal agreement with the park board. We had done that once prior and then pulled out when the appeal happened. But we would sign this memorandum of understanding to commit to that process, and then the park board has to actually approve or ratify that to authorize staff to actually talk to us. So at this point, while this is going on, we haven't actually signed that MOU, but it is our intent within coming weeks that we would actually do that.
But there's no commitment. It's just people who, at this present moment, what's before us today is just a, shall we say, a backroom deal it's been talked about. It's not signed on paper that this is.
Correct. There
The
is no
MOU
signed
has not
paper.
been
I can
signed.
tell you that we have a commitment to it, and we are 100% committed to that future.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you. I'm pleased that you share the opinion that this place should become a park, and I just want to understand what you said. So you think that it'd be a timeline of about 30 years. So presumably in 30 years, then the structure that you're asking permission to be built would be demolished in order to create the park. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, I think 30 years is really optimistic, honestly. Just based on what I know about the neighboring properties, that's the time frame not for park acquisition, but for actual work on a park to begin. And I know that there are no plans with the neighboring properties on any of this to make that possible. So the thinking, I guess what I'm assuming would happen if the park system can't actually use those structures that are there, that they could be moved. It's a house that's sitting on concrete piers, and I believe it could just be moved to another location. And so that's, I guess, a problem that would have to be figured out at the time.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. We're going to move on in our public hearing. So if there's anyone else here who would like to speak on this item, you are welcome to come to the podium now. You can state your name and neighborhood for the record and proceed with your comments. And just a reminder, sorry, everyone will have 2 minutes, so thanks.
Gotcha. President Olson and members, my name is Whitney Clark. I'm the Executive Director of Friends of the Mississippi River. We are an organization that worked to get the MRCA legislation passed at the state legislature and worked closely with the DNR to develop these MRCA rules, and worked very closely with city staff to develop really what we think is really a fine ordinance, a very well developed and sensitive ordinance. I'm here to testify in opposition to the request for this variance to the MRCA overlay district and the bluff setback. As has been pointed out, this appears to be pretty much the exact same request that was denied upon appeal in 2021. The applicant has not only failed to meet the variance requirements, but has actually made no effort to do so, despite the fact that the property has sufficient buildable area to build the project without a variance. I'll point out that the proposed 1,000-foot garage is larger than many homes in the neighborhood, and that should not be sufficient rationale to provide a variance because the applicant needs space for a massive garage. The applicant requests a 0-foot setback where 40 is required, as you've heard, making a mockery of the standard when really no hardship exists. This is obviously inconsistent with the required finding that the extent, location, and intensity of the variance be in substantial compliance with the MERCA plan. To the requested variances regarding park planning, we believe the variances are inconsistent with the 2040 plan by foreclosing the goals of the plan relating to environmental systems, parks, open space, and equity. The 2648 Marshall is a critical link for completing the continuous riverfront trails that
Thank you.
are envisioned in the plan, and this would foreclose that opportunity, as you've heard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? You can come forward now.
Hello, President Olson and Planning Commission. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Forrest Eidbo. I am the Visitor Use and Planning Program Manager for the National Park Service, Mississippi National River and Recreation Area. We're headquartered in St. Paul. Now, you've heard a lot about MERCA, and just real quick, MERCA was established, the idea of it, way back in the 70s, and now we're all the way here today, finally with something with a little bit of teeth, and those teeth are kind of starting to be shaped, and we're trying to see where that goes. I just would like to point out two things that were said today. One of them was on the hardship. The bluffs along the Mississippi River are varied, and some of them have streams that go way up into the parcel. Some are just totally flat. Some of them have historically been changed. They're very varied. Looking at this parcel here, as the previous speaker mentioned, very little effort has been given to comply with the setbacks in any meaningful way. Actually, they're extending the structure over the bluff impact zone. And the idea that covering a bluff is protecting it does not take into account the important wildlife, scenic, and other important parts that a bluff serves on the Mississippi River. Especially when we consider that there is still buildable area, as was mentioned, the green yard area in between the structures that could be built on. The bluff is a much more unique, critical, significant resource than the green yard area, and we'd like to see that bluff area protected, and maybe that green yard area would be better served for buildable area. So those are my 2 quick points. I'd like to thank you again. And remember that the National Park Service, we're here because of the national significance of this resource, and we'd like to say that it is very important that it is protected. Even though this may seem like a small parcel, the impacts of approving this variance could have long-lasting effects throughout the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak?
Hello, my name is Edna Brzaitis. I'm here from Friends of the Riverfront, and I respectfully request the Planning Commission to deny the variances in the conditional use permit. I have been very actively involved in this project, and I can say that I'm sorry that I'm choking here. I appreciate that the city has noticed that there is no change from the previous proposals. That's important because when the city reviewed it, they've had findings, which I am passing out in case you are interested. It says, with regard to the findings applicable to both variances, the applicant failed to establish that there are practical difficulties in complying with the zoning code. The applicant's plight was created by his own voluntary design choices. These design preferences drove the need for the variances, rather than any alleged topographical feature of the existing bluff on the site. So that's really important. He could have changed it, he has said he could change it, and he could make something that will work and would comply with this very important ordinance and law. And what you should take into account too is this is maybe a very unique and special part of the shore of the Mississippi River. The parts on the side that he's saying are different, or where they say there's a different slope, have been filled. Marshall Terrace was filled. I think it was dredged things from the Upper Harbor Terminal. This may be a natural slope. And that was what Doug Snyder, who had been the head of the Mississippi Water Management Organization, conveyed when he looked at the the maps for this. So you have a very special piece of property. If this was not a heavy lift for the city council to turn this down, only one person voted against it, and it was the person who had been in the planning commission. You should deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak?
Hello, my name is Tegan Vale, and I am here on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Marshall Terrace Neighborhood Organization. We would like to ask that the commission deny our applicant's proposal. We believe that past use of the property that was detrimental to the riverfront and neighboring detrimental use of the riverfront does not make it permissible to have the applicant receive a variance for this and detrimentally impact our riverfront. We have substantial interest in the neighborhood as a whole to support each and every resident's access to clean water, to a protected river, and to future expanded park use. While it could be 30 years, 50 years, maybe even 100 years before the Minneapolis Parks Board takes over that land to turn it into a park for our neighbors, that should not matter because that land is dedicated to the use of every Minneapolis resident and every neighbor in Marshall Terrace. So for those reasons, we do support the DNR's review, everybody here today who has spoken against the variances, and we would like to request that you do the same. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? All right. Oh,
Hi, my name is Greg Elsner. I'm an architect with Shelter Architecture. I'm part of the design team that worked on the house. I say part of the team. We are also heavily assisted by Metro Bloom's Landscape Architecture and Quetica Civil Engineering, who did the site plan for the project. When we first met with Andy and Don, they came into our office with this unique idea of building on this pretty peculiar strip of land that goes from Marshall all the way down to the river. And as everyone's been talking about, embanked on the north side by a parking lot that is built onto the river on the south side of Marshall Concrete. So their goal on this house was to have a light touch, both on where the house is sat on the site, and a broader touch, and a broader view of footprint of a small house, small energy use. As we said before, it's a 1,600 square foot house. That's been cited by the civil engineers and landscape architect to sit on top of that existing heavy chunk of concrete that's been added to the site. And that, I guess what I wanted to speak to you about was when we first met Don and Andy, was super compelling was that this project wasn't just about building a house, but about actually improving the property. And you can see that that's the case as we're increasing native planting, rainwater retention has been designed, stormwater runoff. And then again, talking to the structural system, using a light touch of helical piers and a grade beam, the idea of it just sitting above everything that's kind of been added to the site through industrial use, encasing it, and just letting the small single-story structure float at its corner. So that's all I have. Thank you.
thank you. Anybody else? All right, I'm not seeing anyone, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Let's see. Commissioner Campbell?
So thanks to everybody who came out here tonight. We appreciate all the public comments. We learned much more about these proposed developments by hearing from you. So thanks for the dialogue tonight. I also really respect many of the organizations who have been here today and the work that you've done across the Twin Cities to support the river. So thank you for all of your efforts. Ultimately, my opinion on this particular application is that it meets the objectives of the 2040 plan. I agree with the practical difficulties required for the variance, and that the site plan meets the city code. I appreciate the MERCA conversation and about the designation that it has. Ultimately, this is a private landowner who is seeking to make a private decision about his property that, in my belief, he and his family should be allowed to do. We are in a difficult position here in the Planning Commission because we have to call balls and strikes. We don't get to make decisions about properties or developments because we don't like them. We have to make decisions about what's put in front of us and whether it meets, whether the staff recommendation meets what we think is in the essence of the comprehensive plan documents and city code that's in front of us. And so I appreciate the conversation. I also appreciate the gentleman who owns the property saying he is willing to consider this as parkland in the future. To me, this is a publicly available meeting that is on the record. I hope you continue those conversations with the park board, follow through on that MOU that I think would go a long way in assuring many people that this land will be used for that purpose when the time comes. That said, I will be voting to support staff recommendation.
Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you. I was on the commission when this came before us before. I was very skeptical about it and conflicted. I did ultimately vote for it at the time after the public hearing and the presentation from staff, but I was very conflicted afterward. And after the council voted to uphold the appeal and turn it down, I mean, that signals to me, like when we're calling balls and strikes, I feel like we should be adhering to the council because we're subordinate to the council. And also during that meeting the last time around, as was noted in some of the letters we received, we didn't have all of the feedback from some commenters at that time. It came the day of, and but the meeting couldn't be delayed. But I feel like some of that material was really relevant and probably played into the reasons why the council upheld the appeal. I am persuaded that there are reasonable practical difficulties and unique characteristics of this site, but I'm going to vote against the application on the basis that was elsewhere in the City Council's finding, specifically on this finding. The council found in 2021 that the proposed building location is not consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance related to the Mississippi River Corridor Critical Area. Building on the edge of the bluff line has the potential for detrimental impacts in the critical area, including potential impacts on the stability of the bluff and other areas prone to erosion. I don't see any reason to overturn the council's verdict on that. So I guess I would propose we can have Commissioner Campbell make the motion in support of the application, and if that fails, I will propose to deny it on the basis that I just named. I don't have any objection to the conditional use permit, and don't have an additional finding for that. I think my finding might only apply to the other two variances, so I'll seek guidance from staff if or when Commissioner Campbell's proposal fails. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. I'm just gonna, so this one is tricky. I'm a park planner. But I think that it's hard to understand how our, MRCC, is sort of inherent, like if it's subject to a practical difficulty, a bluff is gonna be a practical difficulty, and there's bluffs all along the river. But I do agree that, I mean, it does meet the practical difficulty requirements. If this was any other lot in the city, there would be no question that it meets the practical difficulty. So I guess my point is, maybe there is another way to give this teeth. But in this case, I mean, I think that if we're going to be consistent and apply the zoning code and the comprehensive plan consistently throughout the city, I would be supporting Commissioner Campbell's motion. Yeah, I would also say that I think there is value in a steward of a property taking care of that land until it is time for it to become a park. I don't know how much, teeth there are in an MOU or whatever that agreement is, but if that is the case, I think that's a great way to eventually bring this property into the Minneapolis park system. So, Commissioner Campbell, I can make a motion unless you want to. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Alper.
Thank you. I just wanted to take the opportunity to speak. I've been in, first of all, I think I wanted to say that I've talked with Park Board staff today to let you all know. Reviewed the letter in the packet, and I want to say that I'm especially excited, should this proceed, with the idea of pursuing land dedication in a case like this as part of our parkland dedication ordinance. So I do want to say that would be more immediate than 30 years from now. And to me, that feels important as we think about the importance of the river, and we've talked about it, touched upon it a little bit today, but water is so important, and our river is so important, and I definitely we have a nationally significant river here that we need to protect. And so that's something that I'm keeping in my mind. I think the plans, they look gorgeous, but to me, we really need to protect what we have, and we see water in so many countries around the world as causing huge issues of strife, and I think we need to protect the Mississippi. So what I am seeing here is in line with what Commissioner Meyer has noted before. I would also say it seems to me to be a design preference, not a hardship. I do want to note that the Park Board's letter came on July 12th, and that the meeting we had originally when this was to come forward, I believe, was July 17th. And then since then, there's been new letters submitted by the National Park Service today. The dates are throwing me a little bit, but okay, that's from the DNR, from an old letter. But a new letter from the National Park Service from today, as well as some new information about the 2021 application. And to me, that really sways me that that the what the Park Board staff are saying, ultimately is about future parkland. So for me, I guess I don't think that it meets, everything is difficult along the river, but when do we have to start protecting the river? And I think that day starts today, so I won't be supporting the variances as recommended by staff.
Okay, Ford, Emmerich, and Meyer, in that order. Oh, okay. Commissioner Ford, you want to go? And then Commissioner Emmerich.
Maya, I don't see how this meets the spirit and intent of MERCA. And for that matter, I don't see how it meets the spirit and intent of the comprehensive plan. And I don't think, I'm not convinced that the site is not buildable without the variances. But I understand the staff's saying that we have to use the same standards across the city with regards to the substantial difficulty. So I think we can't use that as a reason. But I do think that there's a problem with the comprehensive plan and with MERCA. So thank you. I'll be voting against the variances.
My question, and I don't know who might be able to answer this for me, is the existing structure on that part of the property, the garage that's there, and I know there was mentioning of a driveway that potentially contributes to runoff into the river. Is the plan proposed by the applicant, when looking at MERCA, likely to have a less detrimental impact on the bluff compared with what is currently there if it were to be left as is? Is that a question that anyone can provide information about?
The public, well, whatever you think's appropriate.
Yeah, so the question is if, I honestly, I think everyone may have a differing opinion about whether or not the existing conditions are more detrimental than the proposed conditions. Staff did use the existing conditions in a way under finding number 3, which talks about the character of the area and whether or not it would have an impact that way. No modifications are really proposed to that existing driveway that goes down at this point in time. So with that in mind, it would be, status quo.
All right, commissioners, I don't see any more questions. Would anyone like to make a motion? Oh, I'll make a motion to adopt staff findings and we'll see what happens.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Alper,
Nay.
Campbell,
Aye.
Emmerich,
Nay.
Ford,
No?
Meyer,
No.
Olson.
Aye.
That's 2 yeas and 4 nays.
Okay, that motion does not pass. Commissioner Meyer, would you like to make a motion?
First, I'd like to request guidance from staff because my findings, I'm not sure that they don't really apply to the conditional use permit.
So if you're looking, so the variance findings are, and I just want to make a point of clarification because we're in kind of a unique situation here. The new zoning code was adopted on July 1st, 2023. That has new variance findings. The first finding, and a lot of terms have been used here tonight. Hardship is not a finding anymore under the zoning code for the variance findings. The first finding right now is currently about whether or not there's a practical difficulty in complying with the zoning code. This application was deemed complete before July 1st, so the first finding for the variance for this application is still whether or not there's a practical difficulty in complying with the zoning code due to circumstances unique to the site. So that findings would need to be made to the contrary of what the staff findings include in the staff report. Going forward, any application that was deemed complete after July 1, the first finding under the variance now refers to unique challenges. And then on balance, the 3 findings add up to a practical difficulty. So just if you hear us say something else, on a different item later, there are projects before you tonight that were deemed complete before July 1st and projects that were deemed complete after July 1st. So that it might get confusing. And I'm not probably even helping answer your question. I'm just making it more confusing right now. So clarification on that. For the variance findings, the shoreland and the MERCA findings were evaluated together in the staff report. You could do the same in making alternate findings. And then the conditional use permit findings, you can adopt staff findings and approve the conditional use permit. You wouldn't need to do anything with that. If you are compelled to deny the conditional use permit, then you would need to make a summary of findings against what's in the staff report.
Right, okay. Thank you for that clarification about the changes that come after July 1st. It's still my understanding that in order to reject the application, we only need to dispute one of the findings. We don't necessarily need to find that there's not a practical difficulty, because I am persuaded that there is a practical difficulty.
Right.
So I was proposing to deny the 2 variances, applying the same language that the city council used in their rejection, which is that the proposed building location is not consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance related to the Mississippi River corridor critical area. Then I would add there, or the shoreland overlay ordinance, or the Minneapolis 2040 plan. And building on the edge of the bluff line has the potential for detrimental impacts in the critical area, including potential impacts on the stability of the bluff and other areas prone to the erosion. So this would only be a finding applicable to the two variances. It's not applicable to the conditional use permit. The staff have said that it's not very, when they said that, if they reapplied today, they could just get it without one, but I think we can just approve the conditional use permit if that's the case. So yeah, I'll reread it. So let me pull up the agenda again. So I move to approve the conditional use permit, deny variances B and C on the basis of the finding that the proposed building location is not consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance related to the Mississippi River Corridor Critical Area, the Shoreland Overlay Ordinance, or the Minneapolis 2040 Plan. Building on the edge of the bluff line has the potential for detrimental impacts in the critical area, including potential impacts on the stability of the bluff and other areas prone to erosion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion?
I'll just add, and to reiterate, I think in this context with this motion, with Commissioner Meyer's conditions, that to reiterate what Kimberly said at the top of this conversation, which is that MRCA federally and from the state are guidelines to the city to implement. And I do believe that the review of this application has shown that this applicant is within whatever guidelines we've developed as a city to support the MRCA law.
Well, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Ford?
Yeah, Commissioner Campbell, you're correct. They are guidelines to us, and we can be guided by them. And I think that it can guide us in interpreting the intent and spirit of MRCA, the city's ordinance, MRCA, and take the advice of the DNR and of the Interior Department.
All right, Commissioner Meyer.
And I'm just going to repeat that I feel like the council is in charge of doing that, and they made a decision, and I think my motion is consistent with what the council has already adopted. Thank you.
All right, any more discussion? I don't see any. All right, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Alper.
Aye.
Campbell.
No.
Emmerich.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Meyer.
Aye.
Olson.
No.
So we have 4 yeas and 2 nays.
All right, that motion passes. So item number 4 is complete. And we will move on to item number 5, which is the rezoning of Van Buren Street, and staff is Andrew Friends.
Good evening, President Olson and Commissioners. Before you today is a proposed rezoning of 20 properties located on the east side of Van Buren Street Northeast between Spring Street Northeast and Autumn Street Northeast. 18 of these properties are developed with single-family homes, and 2 are developed with duplexes. They're located 1 lot off of Central Avenue to the east. The city is bringing forward this proposed rezoning in order to implement an approved comprehensive plan amendment, which amended the built form guidance for the subject properties from Corridor 6 to Interior 3. This comp plan amendment was approved by the City Council on January 12th, 2023, and became effective with its acceptance by the Metropolitan Council on February 21st, 2023. So the city is now bringing forward the corresponding rezoning application to implement the approved comp plan amendment by rezoning these properties from the Corridor 6 Built Form Overlay District to the Interior 3 Built Form Overlay District, retaining the Urban Neighborhood 2 Primary District. No development is proposed at this time. This is just a rezoning that the city is bringing forward to implement that adopted comprehensive plan amendment and resolve the regulatory and policy conflict that exists today with the conflict between the adopted comp plan amendment and the current zoning. There was one public comment received in regard to this application, which you should have received today. I'm happy to talk through any of the specific findings if you have any questions. And staff is recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for staff? I don't see any, thank you. We'll open the public hearing for this item. Is the applicant, or the city is the applicant, right? Or the neighborhood is the okay. We'll open the public hearing to anyone who would like to speak on this item. You'll have 2 minutes. State your name and neighborhood for the record, please.
Hey, thank you. President Olson and Commissioners, my name is Conrad Lane Zabakowski, and I live in Ward 3 and travel this corridor of Central Avenue Northeast often. I'm asking you today to vote to oppose and not recommend this comprehensive plan amendment rezoning because it is counter to Minneapolis 2040 goals originally of increasing availability of homes, especially more affordable homes near transit. You'll notice that in the map, there's 2 gaps where apartments were already approved. As you may know, the Metro Transit 10 bus route currently stops on the corner of Spring Street Northeast and Central Avenue Northeast. In August this year, actually tomorrow or whatnot, Route 10 will see improved headways to every 10 minutes with new investments in transit, and Metro Transit is planning to upgrade those stops to full ABRT service in the next few years with the Metro F-Line Bus Rapid Transit. There are also plans in the works to add dedicated transit lanes with the MnDOT reconstruction of Central Avenue. A lot is happening with transit, and we can have all that investment be wasted on a rezoning that reduces housing options and makes living in Minneapolis more expensive, not more affordable. Please vote to oppose and not recommend this comprehensive plan amendment rezoning. You do have a choice in this. It's coming before you. You have a choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, is there any discussion? Commissioner Meyer?
As commissioners who were here at the time will remember, I was strenuously opposed when the comprehensive plan amendment came forward in this area. I testified against it multiple times as a regular citizen. And I feel it was a terrible decision to downzone an area near very high-quality public transit, when with the F-Line coming even better transit soon. But that's really not the question that's before us today. The policy decision has already been made. The comp plan has been passed. The decision before us today is basically to decide whether Interior 3 zoning is consistent with the comp plan that the council adopted. The Planning Commission is subordinate to the council. They made that decision, which I disagree with, but the decision before us is just to align the regulatory framework with their adopted policy, and I think it is that the staff have made the correct determination that Interior 3 is consistent with that policy. So I'm not going to make the motion, but I will vote in favor of it.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. I'll just say I agree. A lot of us didn't support that, but we need to align the zoning code with the comprehensive plan. Commissioner Ford?
Yes, I'll make the motion to approve the staff report for item 5.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Alper,
Aye.
Campbell,
Aye.
Emmerich,
Nay.
Ford,
Aye.
Meyer,
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
That's 5 yeas and 1 nay.
All right, that motion passes. We've completed item 5. We'll move on next to item number 7, which is 1201 through 1318 Jackson Street Northeast. And staff is Andrew Friends.
Good afternoon, or good evening, President Olson and Commissioners. Before you today are 3 applications to allow a new planned unit development at 1201 through 1318 Jackson Street Northeast and 807 Broadway Street Northeast. This property consists of 6 parcels, which total approximately 6.8 acres in area. The 1201 Jackson Street Northeast parcel is currently developed with a 5-story grain mill and a grain elevator, which were formerly operated by General Mills and are currently vacant. And the 807 Broadway Street Northeast parcel is developed with 2 former industrial buildings that have been adaptively reused for commercial uses, including about 150,000 square feet of office space, a food and beverage use, and a brewery. There are 4 smaller parcels included in the project site that's up at the northern end that are currently undeveloped. All 6 properties are located in the PR1 production mixed use primary district and the Corridor 6 built form overlay district. The applicant is, as I mentioned before, proposing to establish a new planned unit development consisting of these parcels, and they're proposing to construct a new 3-story parking ramp and to convert the former grain mill to accommodate new commercial uses, primarily a new museum and entertainment venue use, along with space for office, food and beverage uses, and retail space. There are 3 land use applications before you today. The first is a conditional use permit to establish the planned unit development consisting of these 6 parcels. The applicant is not seeking any PUD alternatives, so they are just required to earn the base number of PUD points of 10, and staff has recommended awarding PUD points for conservation of the built environment with the existing buildings that they are adaptively reusing, as well as for the pedestrian improvements PUD points. And I would draw your attention with that to condition number 2 on the conditional use permit. Staff is recommending as a condition of approval that the applicant provide a new through-block pedestrian connection that would pass between the proposed parking ramp and the existing 807 Broadway building, connecting from the Quincy Street right-of-way out to the 12th Avenue Northeast and Jackson Street Northeast intersection. The second application is site plan review for the proposed parking ramp, as well as 2 small additions to the former grain mill building. Those additions are circulation stack additions, one on either side of the building, that would allow new staircases and a new elevator in order to allow the proposed uses of the building under the building code. And then the third application is a preliminary plat to consolidate those 6 existing parcels into 2 resultant parcels. In addition to the 3 applications that are before you today, there is also 1 administrative land use application associated with this project. The applicant is seeking a discretionary travel demand management plan. The proposed uses and their sizes for this project require a minor TDMP under the zoning code, but in consultation with Public Works, really the Public Works Department determined that a discretionary TDMP should be required for the project based on the potential for unique travel demand associated with the museum and entertainment venue. So the staff has required a discretionary TDMP, including a formal traffic study and earning 6 TDM points under the zoning code. I'm happy to walk through the findings, and I know Commissioner findings if you have any questions on them. I know Commissioner Meyer requested some more detailed information on the alternative compliance, so I will run through that now. There's quite a few alternative compliance requests, and I can walk through all of those. The first one is for blank walls. So the proposed parking ramp would include blank walls of 25 feet or more in length on its first and second floor, north, south, and west elevations. The blank walls here are proposed in areas where firewalls are required by the building code, where openings are not permitted. So if we look at the location of the parking ramp here, you see that there are some locations where it's very close to other existing buildings on the site, and other locations where it's close to the property lines with the adjacent property to the northwest. So in those locations, they're required by the building code to have firewalls with no openings. Staff has, recognizes that the applicant is working very hard to adaptively reuse the existing buildings on the site, and the ramp, the location of the ramp is really driven by the location of those existing buildings. And with that, they have these requirements in order to comply with the building code. So staff has recommended approval of the alternative compliance related to blank walls, but has also recommended as a condition of approval that all of those blank walls be mitigated through some combination of metal screens, living walls, or murals. There is also alternative compliance required for exterior materials, if I can get there. The proposed addition, here we go. The proposed addition on the southwest side of the building is shown in their application materials as being constructed of plain-faced concrete block, which is not permitted facing the public right-of-way. Staff found that, given this location, visible from the 12th Avenue Northeast right-of-way, adjacent to the primary entrance to the museum at kind of the most active portion of the site, plain-faced concrete block was not appropriate. And so staff is recommending denial of that alternative compliance request, and a condition of approval that the plain-face concrete block be replaced with a permitted exterior material like a metal panel or a different masonry product. The project also requires alternative compliance for window coverage in 3 locations. So one of those is, 2 adjacent to each other are the food and beverage spaces on the south elevation adjacent to 12th Avenue Northeast. So you can see those, that's kind of the, this is gonna show up, but no, it's not gonna show up. But if you look in the upper left hand on the screen, that's the south elevation. So it would be the first floor there, that length of windows that match there. So those spaces would be at 16% and 29.2% window coverage, where 30% is required. And then on the upper floors on the north elevation, so that would be the elevation shown in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, 10% window coverage is required there, and they're at 4.2. Staff is recommending approval of these alternative compliance requests. This existing building is well below all of its existing window requirements, and the applicant is adding a lot of new window area. They're reopening a lot of historic windows that have been infilled, and given the type of building, its adaptive reuse, and the variety of window requirements that it's subject to, staff thinks that the windows as proposed by the applicant are appropriate. There is also alternative compliance required to the site plan review standards for parking garages, to a couple of those different standards. One related to active functions and the proportion of the garage that can be, the frontage of the garage that can consist of parking. So normally that is limited to 30%. In this case, they haven't proposed any other uses as part of the parking garage. Staff is recommending approval of that alternative compliance, as well as alternative compliance to allow the top level of the parking garage to be unscreened from view from above. In this case, the parking ramp is located primarily at the interior of the site. So it has 2 frontages. It has a very short section on Quincy, and it has a very short section at the Johnson and 12th intersection. And that section at Johnson and 12th is set back into the site. In both locations, the width of the parking ramp is just the width of a double-loaded drive aisle. And these provisions were created with the intent of mitigating long garage frontages on public right-of-ways, when you'd have, if this ramp were oriented so that one of the lengths of it was fronting Quincy or 12th, that would be where we would want to see parking constitute no more than 30% of that frontage. In this case, they just have the end. And certainly in this case, the length of that parking frontage is less than what we might see in a ramp that complies with this standard, that has a longer, that has a more typical length of frontage. The parking garage also does not comply with the standard that requires that vehicles and garage lighting be fully screened. It would be open in along much of its length. Staff has recommended denial of that request for alternative compliance. Complying with that standard is reasonable. And staff has recommended as a condition of approval that metal screens or living walls be installed along all open areas along the ramp. And the project does also require alternative compliance for general landscaping based on the number of canopy trees. In this case, it's a planned unit development. The landscaping metrics are measured across the entire site as a whole. The 807 Broadway site is about half of the project's total site. That property went through a review process. It went through PDR and had landscaping improvements done about 6 years ago. And there's very little work proposed to that property. So if we were to evaluate, under the zoning code, we evaluate the site as a whole, but if you were to evaluate just this proportion of the site, the resultant lot 2, they would be in compliance with those general landscaping requirements. And so staff is recommending approval of that alternative compliance, although I would note that for the parking and loading landscaping and screening requirements, there are just a couple additional trees required. And so we have a condition requiring a couple more canopy trees reflecting those parking and loading landscaping and screening requirements. And that would be the next request. In this case, they have this parking area proposed along 12th, and then there is a loading area at the far southeast corner of the property. The parking area along 12th has a landscaped yard that meets the required depth of a landscaped yard, but it does not provide a vegetative screening of 3 feet in height or 60% opacity, and it does not, neither, the parking and loading area as a whole does not meet the standard that requires 1 canopy tree for every 25 feet of parking or loading frontage on 12th. And then for the loading area, there's no landscaped yard at all because that's accessed by maneuvering into it. There's no area other than maneuvering area between that loading area and the right-of-way. So staff is recommending approval of alternative compliance related to not providing a landscaped yard adjacent to that loading area, but is recommending denial of alternative compliance related to the screening adjacent to the parking area and the number of canopy trees relative to the parking and loading frontage, and has recommended conditions of approval corresponding to that. So that is all of the alternative compliance. I know it's a lot, but I'm happy to answer any other questions or highlight anything else. And staff is recommending, if I can get to the end again, approval of the 3 applications subject to the conditions of approval as listed in the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a lot of alternative compliance requests that they've made. I really feel like this project would have benefited substantially from appearing at the committee of the whole for us to go more into it, and regret that it wasn't. But the areas that I would ask for some more detail are the alternative compliance for the blank walls and the landscaping. This is in the Northeast Arts District, so I want to make sure that it's, we're doing everything we can to improve the visible appearance around there. I don't know if there are any murals proposed, or if that would be compatible with it, if that's something that we could require as part of the alternative compliance. And then for the landscaping, I would appreciate it if you can repeat it and expand on it. Like, are there any images that show, or can you walk us through like what would be required in the default if alternative compliance is not granted, and explain how your recommended alternative compliance would improve over that for the public?
Sure, I appreciate that. Commissioner Meyer, when it comes to the blank walls, denying alternative compliance for the blank walls would require some form of articulation or materials change in the ramp's exterior. The ramp is already as narrow as it can be while complying with the building code and meeting their intended circulation for the ramp. So we could, you could deny that. You have the ability to do so, but understand that the result of that would be a very substantial change to the design of the ramp that would have a significant impact on its functionality and its cost. So the presence of those blank walls there is inherent to the footprint of the ramp. And so staff did recommend as a condition of approval that all of those blank walls be mitigated, covered with some type of metal screen, living wall, or mural. I think the applicant can potentially speak to their intent or their tenants' intent to how they might comply with that. But that's what staff has recommended. And then on the landscaping, so it's the canopy tree requirement that they are not fully meeting. And 63 canopy trees are required for the site as a whole. They've proposed 24. And so they've proposed 24 canopy trees, 12 coniferous trees, and 12 ornamental trees across the site. But like I mentioned—
Can you repeat that, sorry?
Yep. They've proposed 24 canopy trees, 12 coniferous trees, and 12 ornamental trees. And the tree requirement is 63 canopy trees. That tree requirement is calculated across the entire site, which includes the 807 Broadway parcel, which went through landscaping and screening when it was converted from MPS into the applicant's current use of the property. So that went through PDR and went through the landscaping and screening administrative review. And there are no changes proposed to that property except at the northern end. If we were to look only at the portion of the site that is proposed to be significantly altered as part of this project, the canopy tree requirement would be, I know I have it here, 23, which is what they have. But they've only proposed 11 canopy trees on that northern part. So, they're not necessarily fully meeting it for that portion of the property. But they've also proposed 5 coniferous trees and 7 ornamental trees on that portion of the property. Their site plan is really driven by the location of these existing buildings, and the resultant site plan creates areas that are between buildings that are not really well suited for canopy tree growth in the long term. And so staff is supportive of the alternative compliance request. We've recommended 27 canopy trees because we've recommended those 3 additional ones for the parking and loading frontage, but that's how staff has approached it.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for staff before we, Commissioner Alpert?
Yeah, I do have a question, and it pertains to this application, but I've also seen this come up several times where I see pedestrian improvements being used to get TDM points and pedestrian improvements for planned unit development, planned PUD points. There we go. And honestly, to me, that seems like a little bit like double dipping, like getting points for doing one set of things, and that just something, I don't know if you could speak to, are they substantially different, the pedestrian improvements that are qualifying for TDM points as opposed to the PUD points?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Alper. Yes, they are different. So the pedestrian improvement PUD points are pretty open-ended. They allow the applicant and staff and the commission to look kind of broadly at pedestrian improvements. They don't have specific standards. The TDM pedestrian improvements are very specific. They're restricted to the right-of-way, and they require meeting two out of 3 standards related to widening a substandard sidewalk or providing a sidewalk where there's an existing sidewalk gap, providing appropriate street furniture, and providing an enhanced landscaping zone, always within the right of way. And then the PUD points can be broader. In this case, they are eliminating a sidewalk gap on the north side of 12th Avenue Northeast. That's in the right of way. They're constructing a new public sidewalk along the length of their property. That's what they're doing for the TDM pedestrian improvement points. And with that, they have not shown enhanced landscaping here, but they will need to do so and get approval of it both by planning staff and by Public Works before the TDM will get final approval. For the PUD points, we've considered that elimination of that sidewalk gap, as well as primarily the through block pedestrian connection that would cut almost through the middle of this super block.
Okay, thanks for that. It's great to hear the standards for TDM points, but also it does sound like there is some credit being applied from that sidewalk with the PUD points too. Did I understand that correctly?
Commissioner Alper, I mean, we mentioned it in our findings. If the Planning Commission wanted to exclude it, I think they would, in staff's opinion, they would still be meeting the standards for the PUD points. So I don't know that it makes a difference in the outcome, but the Planning Commission could make an alternate finding.
Yeah, I guess for a larger, I don't feel a need dramatically in that area. I just, I would be interested to know how often the interpretation of the standards results in having this sort of double dipping happening. Thank you.
All right. So could we amend the PUD points well, maybe we should get into the public hearing first. The commission has the ability to amend the findings on the conditional use permit. Wait, yeah, correct?
President Olson, that is correct,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
And because that standard is relatively open-ended,
Yeah.
you certainly could
Okay.
come up with a different condition than staff.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more questions, so we will move on to the public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant here, and would they like to come forward and speak on this item?
Good evening. My name's Charlie Nestor. I'm with Hillcrest Development. Address is 2424 Kennedy Street Northeast. Represent the ownership of both 807 and 1201 Jackson in combination. And we're here. It's a difficult site, and we specialize in bringing buildings back to life. And that's what we've tried very hard to do with both the Highlight Center, which was the former school district headquarters, as well as with the former Purity Oats and General Mills facility. There are a variety, as we've seen, a lot of items that go into getting the conditional use permit to begin the next phase, which would be some off-street parking, which ultimately our goal is to resolve the large block of land that we own on Quincy Street, which everybody, including ourselves, wants to see something a little denser there in the future. So we're excited about the potential clients and tenants that will be coming here. They are arts-based. We fully expect that they will have strong opinions on providing artwork and murals on the walls. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Oh, Commissioner Meyer.
Can you say more about the murals? Like, do you have any diagrams about where they would be placed? Or, I mean,
sure.
I've gone through the staff report and just don't see as much detail as I was hoping for a project of this magnitude.
Yeah, so when we talk about that pedestrian, splitting the super block, I think is how we phrase it, between the building and the parking ramp, I think that's where we'll look to have the most active use, putting in some artwork and living walls, but you're also on the north, so we're fighting Mother Nature in terms of what can grow there. It will be a walkway, so the group that we're working with is talking about doing some digital and some more virtual artwork. The walls that face the north or the west since that is a very tight site, we want to create and put something that will be sturdy enough and that won't become an area for tagging. So I think a combination of steel will work with the staff on the right material so that we don't have to, we want to place the murals as opposed to somebody else placing murals on the building. So we've done many other things in the area, including Highlight Center and Crown Center, 1201, 1209, the Davis Frost Linseed Oil Factory. So a lot of things in the area.
And can you speak to your landscaping request?
So I mean, if we can put more landscaping on the site, we certainly will. The area in question where we'll be working with Public Works to build a new sidewalk. Essentially, our building is a zero lot line along the south edge of 12th. So much like what we did when we redeveloped the Highlight Center, we put in a new corridor from the corner of Broadway to the end of our property. That was a sidewalk we worked with the city staff and Public Works to build in that easement area. There's some green space, and our desire would certainly be to try and do that in that same area along 12th. But we're also fighting kind of depth of the area and traffic, Mother Nature and snow. Where we can, we'll certainly do more. We have green roofs over at 807 Broadway. We haven't really looked at that at 1201 just because they're difficult to manage and maintain.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any more questions, so thank you. We'll move on in the public hearing. If there's anyone else here who would like to speak on this item, you can come forward. You have 2 minutes to speak on this item. All right, I don't see anyone, so I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, is that Commissioner Ford?
Report. I want to comment to Hillcrest Development has been a long-time partner in the city of Minneapolis. They were working in Minneapolis at redeveloping old buildings and building new buildings at a time when we could not find developers willing to do that in Minneapolis. And so I commend the history you've had in Minneapolis, and I thank you for it.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Commissioner Meyer, discussion?
I don't feel ready to vote for the motion yet. This is a major project with significant negative externalities on the community. I feel, like I said, that it should have gone to the committee of the whole. It's the developer's choice, whether they choose to do that. They can choose to not take the time to come to the committee of the whole, but it is a risk for them if they don't, and leaves some of the discussion that could have happened otherwise to get into more detail about things like murals and trees and windows and things like that. I don't feel ready to grant alternative compliance for each of them. We have the regulations that we do to protect against the negative effects, and especially in an area which has very little landscaping. That's part of the Northeast Arts District. I'd really like to see more detail before we grant that alternative compliance. So I'm not going to vote for the motion as is. If it was modified to strike some of the alternative compliance, I would be willing to, but I can't vote for it as is. Thank you.
Commissioner Alper?
Thank you. Yeah, I too noticed lots of alternative compliance. Kind of feel like it's trying to put a square peg in a round hole here. I want to mention some things here before you which impact my thoughts on this. Our city, we declared a climate emergency in 2019. In 2022, as part of the Park Board, we chose a strategic direction of act boldly for our climate future. As a city, we just passed the Climate Equity Action Plan, and then the hottest day on earth ever recorded was July 6, 2023. So given all those things, I'm disappointed, frankly, to see a net increase, almost double the amount of parking at this site. I just noted that our max vehicle parking for surface parking calls for 100 surface parking. It's currently at 274, going down to 201, so that's in the right direction, but with this parking ramp, it goes up. And of course, the parking ramp calls for lots of alternative compliance. So at this point, I also am not ready to vote in support of the motion as made, and would be interested in alternative, striking some of those alternative compliance pieces.
I think that I would support Commissioner Ford's motion. I would like to suggest or state a friendly amendment, Commissioner Ford, if you're willing to hear it on the conditional use permit item number 2, which is the through block pedestrian connection. The last line would read, shall be at least 8 feet in width, well-lit, landscaped, and fully accessible. So just widen it and add some landscaping through there. Okay. I think the seconder would also have to accept it. Okay. I just think that, this is a big change, but it's exciting to see this space developing. It sounds like there's some cool things that would be going in here. The maximum number of parking spaces here is 900 something. So I don't love to see a giant parking ramp go in, but I think that, they are accommodating a lot of uses, a lot of sort of intense uses. So, all right. Any other discussion, or should we vote on the motion?
Chair Olson, I apologize. I had to step out for a second. Did this motion get a second?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, seeing none.
Chair Olson, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Meyer.
Yeah, I just want to expand a little bit on what my alternative to the motion would be. So I would propose to deny alternative compliance to the blank walls, to the windows, and to the landscaping requirements, noting that the applicant could return and submit the application again with more detail about what they would provide. And that would give them the opportunity to hear from, for example, Commissioner Marwa, who is has a lot of expertise on that. But that's just wanted to clarify that that would be my alternative. Thank you.
All right, any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Alper.
No.
Campbell.
Aye.
Emmerich.
Yes.
Ford.
Aye.
Meyer.
No.
Olson.
Aye.
That's 4 yeas and 2 nays.
All right, that motion passes, and we have completed that item. Our next item is item number 8, 900 20th Avenue South, and staff is Aaron Hanauer.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. 900 20th Avenue South is located in the Seward neighborhood, just to the south of Interstate 94, north of East Franklin, east of Cedar Avenue, Minnehaha, and then just to the west of 20th Avenue. Pathway to Recovery requires a conditional use permit to establish a medication-assisted treatment facility that would serve those in need and also provide lodging for up to 16 adults for overnight stays. To help with substance use disorders undergoing medically assisted detoxification and withdrawal treatment. There's no exterior changes proposed to the building. And CPED, for this conditional use permit, CPED sees the project meeting the findings and is recommending approval. Staff does not see the use to be detrimental or injurious to the surrounding area. There's a management plan in place that's been submitted to you, 24/7 staffing, nurses, social workers, counselors, and mental health practitioners. All activities will take place in the building. There's a waiting room and control area within the building where patients enter the building. And there are site improvements planned to bring the site closer to compliance with zoning code requirements, landscaping, bike parking, and screening of mechanical areas. Complies with zoning code requirements. There's specific development standards for a medication-assisted facility like this. They meet the spacing. The nearest hospital use 0.37 miles away. Maximum number of beds, they're complying with that standard of 16 beds, and having a management plan that in place that defines the use and order of the area. Also staff also sees the project meeting the comprehensive plan goals of including providing healthcare and emergency services to those in need. There's a letter of support from the Seward Neighborhood Organization that's been submitted as part of your addendum packet, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Aaron. Commissioners, are there any questions for staff? I don't see any, thank you. We will move on to our public hearing. So I'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant here and would they like to speak on this item? If you would like to, you can come forward.
Hello, President Olson and Planning Commission. My name is Dan Noyer. I'm with Blumenthal's Architecture, and I'm here with Dr. Sadiq, who's the visionary for this, and we've been working extensively with Aaron on getting this project to fit within the community. We feel, of course, it does with a conditional use permit, so that's why we're here. Dr. Sadiq.
Good evening, everybody. Hi, I'm Dr. Ali. I'm with Mayo Clinic. I grew up here in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. I went to high school here, and I did my undergrad here as well. Our proposed plan is that we have a partial hospitalization. Actually, it's going to be the first one in Hennepin County. The way it works is that we have a MAT clinic, the outpatient side, and we have enhanced treatment where we do the psychotherapy. And so when we initiate treatment, typically patients go into withdrawal. And so most of the time we lose them to EDs, and then we send them elsewhere, and then so there's that disconnect. And so this program here will allow us to be able to send our patients to our detox side. And then while they're in there, we can continue giving them enhanced treatment, whether it's counseling, psychotherapy, and then we can then connect them to lodging. I think this is a unique experience. It's the evidence-based medicine now, the trend. As you know, we're dealing with an opiate crisis in this country. 1 in 7 Americans are dealing with substance use disorders. 1 in 10 are actually seeking treatment for it. And we're spending over $8.5 billion in the US just treating for opiate use disorders. There's been a 35% increase in Minnesota in opiate use disorders and overdose in 2021. And then since then, with the COVID pandemic, the gap, the disparity, the lack of medical access has kind of widened. We do have the support of the community surrounding us. As you know, Seward is supporting us, Cedar Tenant Association is supporting us. There's a huge need, and it's a crisis, and I think every one of us should do our part. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this item? If so, you can come forward now and state your name and address or neighborhood for the record.
Thank you. My name's Dylan Jennings, 1819 Minnehaha Avenue, a New Dimension Child Enrichment Center. We're a child care facility housing 81 children in the Seward neighborhood, about 50 yards from this proposed place. We would have a problem with the attics and whatnot that come through there. I know that there is a 16-bed facility. There's also mention of 125 clients or up to 125 clients in that neighborhood. If you haven't been in that area, I do understand, that there is a need for medication and some sort of treatment. But in that area, we are a daycare center. We deal with the people in that area every day. There is a school across the street, and we just feel that that is not the place for this facility. Thank you.
Thank you. You've already spoken. Oh, if it's the applicant team? Well, we'll ask, if there's questions, commissioners can ask you. Sorry. All right, is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this item, who hasn't already spoken? All right, I'm seeing none, so I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, is there any discussion, or would anyone like to make a motion? Commissioner Meyer?
I support this and will move to approve it. This is the type of facility that we need more of, and it's in an area designated Transit 20. So I believe they could have a substantially larger facility if they chose to proceed with that. I'm pleased to see the support of the Seward Neighborhood Group. So with that, I'll move the staff recommendation.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I just have a question for staff. Typically, certain uses have some uses have a distance they need to be from like a school, like I don't know, like a tobacco sales or something. Is there any type of standard for something like this?
Chair Olson, for this use, the only spacing standard is to another facility like this. So
Okay.
not to schools or other uses.
All right. All right. Commissioner Emmerich.
I would just say, as the representative on this body who sits on the school board for Minneapolis Public Schools, I know that what our kids need are healthy adults who are getting the care they need. And so this is very helpful to me, and I just thank you for your application.
All right, I'm not seeing any more discussion, so I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Alper.
Aye.
Campbell.
Abstain.
Emmerich.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Meyer.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
That's 5 yeas and 1 abstention.
All right, that motion passes, and that completes item number 8. Our next and our final item is item number 9, and staff is Lindsay Silas.
Good evening again. This project in front of you is at 2432 Chicago Avenue. The site is currently vacant and fronts on Chicago, which is the goods and services corridor. The applicant is proposing to construct a new 5-story mixed-use building containing 20 dwelling units and 2,400 square feet of commercial space. This is an interesting situation in which the applicant had submitted an application prior to the implementation of the land use rezoning study, and then upon discussion with staff, ended up withdrawing and resubmitting to be evaluated after the effective date of the rezoning. So the land use applications required under the updated zoning code include side yard setback variances to the north and south interior side yards to reduce the setback requirement from 9 feet to 7 feet, and site plan review. So here is a photo of the site. And I'm going to go through some of the plans. I do want to note that most of the applicant's materials show the rear of the site abutting an alley. So staff relies on the applicant's surveyor and the submitted applications from the architect to indicate surrounding properties and features. Later on, after the public notice had gone out, the homeowners association located to the west of the site contacted staff and notified us that that is not an alley, it is a private drive. So that was an error on the submitted applicant materials, and it is something that may arise later as we're taking public comment. So that is not an alley, and that is private property, and so that has influenced one of the conditions the staff has revised onto the application, and will because even Public Works under the PDR review had assumed that this was an alley based on the submitted survey and civil plans. All of those indications will have to be revised upon resubmittal for PDR. So here is the proposed building on the site. The side yard setback variance, there is a provision in the zoning code that requires that the side yard setback be increased when the building exceeds 75% of the depth of the lot. So that is what is triggering a 9-foot setback on the north and south sides rather than a 7-foot setback, which we would tend to see for a 5-story building. So the applicant has proposed that 7-foot setback. Given the length of the building would have to be shortened a little bit more than 10 feet in order to comply, or in order to not exceed that 75% provision. So the first floor would be 2,400 square feet of commercial and a small lobby for the apartment, as well as some circulation and a bike room. Then here's a floor plan for the upper levels. Each upper floor plan includes 5 units and some elevations as well. So there's no parking proposed on the site. It's just entirely pedestrian access and with a bicycle room, and a rendering submitted. So staff is recommending denial of the variances. The condition of the depth of the building is a condition created by the applicant. So when we're looking at the site, it is a very standard city lot. It's 128 feet deep, and there's nothing substandard about the depth of the lot that would result in the building taking up more of the lot than usual. And so if the building was revised to be slightly over 10 feet shorter, the variances would not be required. And so staff has not identified any sort of practical difficulty unique to the site that would result in a need for the variance. So staff is recommending denial of both variances, given the lack of unique circumstances on the site. And staff is recommending approval of the site plan review with the condition that the applicant either revise the setbacks or the depth of the building to comply with the setback requirements. And we have 9 additional conditions that are applied to the site plan review application. And I just wanted to note that if the applicant were to revise the depth of the building, it would probably reduce the number of units, and units of buildings with less than 20 units can be, with no other applications, can be reviewed fully administratively. So staff is recommending that we condition the application so the applicant doesn't then have to go reapply for a new administrative application after this. But they would be able to do that in the event of not receiving approval of this site plan review application at hand today. So I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. I don't see any questions from staff, so we'll continue on with the public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant here, and would they like to speak?
Hi, my name is Evan Hall. Good evening, President Olson and Commissioners. I am representing Wilson Molina of Molina Realtors. This lot is currently vacant, and what we're proposing is a little bit different than what you've typically seen around Minneapolis. As opposed to collecting lots similar to what the hospital does, similar to what lots of larger apartments are doing, and tearing down all of the residential structures in the neighborhood, we're proposing mixed use, missing middle, kind of medium density project. So I just have a few slides. I'll be very brief on this. I know there are a lot of people that are here to discuss this today. As I mentioned, I'm here representing Wilson Molina, who is the owner and the contractor. He grew up within 1 block of this site. There's an amenity for bike storage, which is required by the city of Minneapolis, that is internal to the structure, and it takes up quite a bit of the first floor level. Commercial amenity is planned for a small grocery store. There are currently 1 ADA unit per floor above the main level, so 4 ADA units planned. If we were to shorten the building from the current length to a shorter length, we would only have the capacity to create 1 ADA unit, which is the minimum required by code for this sort of structure. So we would be losing 4 studio units, and 3 ADA units would be lost as part of that reduction. There's a brick facade on the main level. It is a type 1A concrete construction on the main floor and type 5A wood construction above. There's an elevator that has access to all floors. The quality of the building is quite high compared to some of similar projects around town, so we're really excited with some of the plans here. This is the ground floor plan. It's a little bit easier to read than the black and white ones that you have. You can see the green on the left of the plan is the bike storage amenity, 2 ADA restrooms, and then a ground floor commercial space in blue. We have a mechanical room, but there is no basement. We're trying to do a light touch on the property, so doing a basement would be beneficial financially, but we're not proposing a basement. And then you can see on the right in the yellow is the other stair corridor, the main entry, and the elevator shaft. On the second floor, this is the same plan proposed for the second floor through the 5th floor. Each of the 4 of the 5 units per floor are 1 bedrooms, and then there's 1 studio on the lower left. That studio would be removed if we were to, yeah, I mentioned that. Okay, so here are the numbers that Lindsay presented. So the lot is 50 feet by 128 feet, which is substantial for a duplex or a triplex or a normal development on this lot. However, because this type of building is kind of a prototype for future missing middle buildings, it is a constrained lot, and we would make the argument that there's practical difficulties due to the unique configuration of the project with this parcel not being combined with other parcels. In order to meet the 75-foot requirement, which would get rid of the 2 variances, we would need to make the building 10.5 feet shorter. So I just have a few really quick diagrams showing what that would look like. It's pretty minor in terms of the modifications here. So you can see an elevation. There's a red line that's 10 feet shorter. Kind of go back and forth in that. Our argument is the exterior. It is not a major change. We're under the floor area ratio under both configurations. This is some recent projects within a block of the site. I just show this because it's kind of different than some of the development happening that we're proposing. This is directly kitty corner from the property. The Children's Hospital, great neighbor to have, but I lived within a half block of this site for several years, and they're a wonderful neighbor, but they didn't actually, their facade doesn't have any windows, I guess is my point here. This is looking across the street in the northern direction, which is really an amenity to the neighborhood. There are lots of people walking their dogs, and this is a good development that originally had commercial slated for the first floor and now is entirely residential. This is the proposed structure. You can see it is on the left image. To the left side of it is on a rapid bus route. To get downtown Minneapolis is just a few minutes from here. We're not able to notch the building. If we were able to notch the building just 2 feet in any part of it, based on my understanding, Lindsay can correct me if I'm wrong, if we were able to notch the building 2 feet, we would be able to keep the building longer than 75% of the length. Is that? No, that's not. So that was.
The increased side yard setback is due to the length of the building. So if you were to bring the building in 2 feet on each side and comply with the 9-foot setbacks, the variance would not be required.
Okay, thank you. Just my final point, if we were to reduce the side yard setbacks to 9 feet on either side, we would have to single load the corridor, and we would lose quite a bit of floor space. We did have alternate plans that were exploring that option, and they were not as nice in terms of light quality Right now, we're getting windows all along the units. And the previous design, there was just a single door corridor with one window on the end of each unit, which was kind of difficult. So with that, in summary, we really do want to work together with the neighbors. I know they made a few suggestions and really were helpful in providing documentation that our surveyor, who had some missteps on his survey, they were grateful enough to provide information that we did not have. So we are revising our plans, and we're willing to work together any way possible with the neighborhood and the neighbors to make this an amenity for the neighborhood, additional housing for a long-term future that we believe matches the 2040 plan. Thanks.
Thank you. Looks like Commissioner Meyer has a question.
Yeah. Can you explain what notching the building means? I don't know what that means.
I think I misspoke on the notching. What I meant by notching, is if the building didn't go straight back, if it were to notch in and go back, I was under the misunderstanding that would allow the length to be more than 75% of the lot, but that appears not to be the case. I misunderstood that.
Okay.
That was a misstatement on my behalf.
And then can you go over the difference and what the consequences are between a single loaded and a double loaded corridor?
A single loaded corridor would provide windows on, for example, the south side only along the corridor. So by double loading the corridor, we're able to get units on both the north and the south of the corridor, which is a little bit more efficient and allows in more natural light than if we were to do a corridor on one side of the building and then all units on the other side of the building.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ford?
I understand that. You're saying that you couldn't have windows on the north or south side because of what?
Oh, in the hypothetical situation that we were trying to make a 5-story building with 9-foot setbacks on the north and the south, we wouldn't be able to get the width enough for doing a double-loaded corridor.
I understand that, right.
And then to answer your question, we could put windows in the corridor, but they wouldn't be windows serving units. They would just be windows serving the corridor, which we feel is a waste of material for not, our current corridor doesn't have any windows in it, but at least now all the windows are operable by the tenants and not by staff, maintenance.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, I'm not seeing any more questions. Thank you. We'll move on in our public hearing. So if there's anyone else here who would like to speak, you can come to the podium. Everyone will have 2 minutes on the timer, and you can state your name and neighborhood and proceed with your comments. And if you guys want, because there's a lot of you, you can just line up. Just don't make me ask every time, yeah.
Thank you, Chair Olson and Commissioners. I am the president of the City Homes on Park Avenue Owners Association. We are the largest occupant of the block between 24th and 25th and Chicago and Park. We have 29 units. And I would like to read our request for the perimeter fence for 2432 Chicago Avenue. Let's see, I'm gonna be quick here. So, with the implementation of the city's new 2040 plan, zoning classifications, and building codes, which seek to increase density, some consideration should be taken regarding the increased flow of people to and from high-density buildings with respect to tenants trespassing on neighboring properties and becoming a nuisance to those who live nearby. This is of concern especially for the lots that have only a single side street with site access, but which are required to provide more than one exit door. I'll skip ahead because you should have this in your packet from Lindsay, am I correct? The zoning code in these circumstances actually requires fencing, and this is zoning code 530.260. Crime prevention through environmental design, site plans shall employ best practices to increase natural surveillance and visibility to control and guide movement on the site, and to distinguish between public and non-public spaces. Site plans shall include the following crime prevention elements: territorial reinforcement and space delineation, locate landscape, sidewalks, and lighting, fencing, and building features to clearly guide pedestrians to movement through the site and to control and restrict people to appropriate locations. Natural access control, locate and natural access control. Locate entrances, exit signs, fencing, landscape, and lighting to distinguish between public and private spaces. Control access and to guide people coming in to and from the site. So our concern as an association is we want to make sure that people realize, especially if they're going to a grocery store or wherever this is going to be on the main floor, that our property is private. So they should not be cutting from Chicago or Park Avenue through our property to get to this location on Chicago Avenue. Thank you.
My name's David Asselstein, and I'm a member of the board of City Homes on Park. I'd like to say that City Homes on Park Avenue objects to all variances which would result in increasing the number of units in the building and/or occupants. Also, during construction, all construction activity must enter the site from Chicago Avenue. I personally contacted Wilson Molina by phone on January 23rd and informed him that the rear drive was a private drive and not an alley, yet on all the drawings it's listed as an alley. The association requests that all rooftop rainwater flow from Chicago to Chicago Avenue and not off the back of the property onto our property. And my last point is that one part of the staff recommendation regarding residential developments without off-street parking or loading concludes, the site qualifies for the exemption that a temporary drop-off and pickup space is not required when a curb cut wouldn't otherwise be provided. I'd like to point out that in the staff recommendations packet on page 16 and 28, there are drawings there showing an existing driveway apron. So the curb cut is already there. And since the property has an existing driveway apron curb cut, we request the site plan review guideline 530.155 requirement for one temporary drop-off and pickup space be required. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Paul Dunker Greenbaum. I'm the house that's to the left in that photo on the south side. And I think the 2040 plan is great, and I'm glad that we're increasing more affordable housing in Minneapolis. It's certainly needed. So I like the idea. However, the variance it's really close to our house. Like, it's not really functional. And, you know, I would hope that there's some consideration, just like what they're saying with the flow of traffic moving through it, having a fence around it would be really great. That way they don't go back to the alley, which is fenced off with other properties that don't have access. And also, let's see. Yeah, just concerned about the floodlighting too, and how that's gonna pour directly into our windows with light pollution. It's just pretty disruptive. And oh, the parking. So Chicago, it's right across from the hospital. There aren't many places to park. If there's an amendment or something that could be made to maybe include underground parking for them, because I mean, this doesn't look like it's going to be cheap, affordable housing. It looks like it's probably going to be on more expensive side. So people are going to own cars that live here, and there's already a lot of crime in our neighborhood. One of us had a car stolen from our driveway. So if there's going to be a lot of cars that are more expensive on Chicago, I think this is going to increase crime with that. But if they have a private parking garage, I think it'll help a lot. And it'll also help with the parking problem, especially if they're going to be putting a restaurant or something on the first floor. Then where are the people are going to come for the commercial space? Where are they going to park? And also, the tallest building on the block is that 4-story apartment, city apartments. This is 5 stories. This is pretty high. I would also recommend amendments, maybe make it a little bit lower, 3 stories maybe, to match all the other houses. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And I'm part of the association. Right, I just heard that he wants to build a store. In the recent past, there used to be a store there right across by the Children's Hospital, and that was such a drug crime. It was crazy. We are very close to Chicago and Franklin, which is a really terrible crime going there. But if we build a story like that, it would be terrible. There's no parking anywhere. Literally, there's no parking. That's why the Atlanta Hospital has their own parking. They build their own parking. There's no parking there. It's too big. They say there's going to be enough lights to provide around the side, but there isn't. It's going to be way too tall. Our neighbors are going to have there's no light for them to have. And we also have, in our association, there's a beautiful park. We have worked so hard on that park. We put up trees, gardeners, everything. It's so beautiful. We walk our dogs. And then we recommend if they build a fence around it, just because we don't want them to come and ruin all these new people coming in, because there's going to be so many people living there, and they're just going to damage our beautiful grass and everything that we have built. And there's beautiful, a whole bunch of trees there, and I just don't want so much foot traffic around the area just to ruin it. Or we also don't want to become Karens and be like, I'm sorry, you can't be in our property, you have to leave. And we don't want to be that kind of people, and so we just want, hopefully they can build a fence that blocks everything, so they're not allowed to go back there, and so we can have our beautiful gardeners and our beautiful trees be good. Sorry, thank you.
Anyone can come up, whoever wants to go next.
My name is Doug Sweet, and I own the property across the street from that building. And I can just reiterate what the other two gentlemen have told you. On my way here, I thought I might stop at my place, which is directly across from there. No parking. I came here instead. I think it's much too big for the area. Every other structure except the large apartment building, which is on the corner of 24th on the north side, was built close to the turn of the century. My building was 1896. This would be a jarring, ugly structure, in my opinion. Parking would be difficult now, would be close to impossible later. It's unfortunate. I think everyone on the block probably had an expectation that a structure similar to this one on the south, which is what it would have replaced, would be very appropriate, but this is just much too big for this street. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, last chance. All right, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, is there any discussion or would anyone like to make a motion? Commissioner Meyer? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this project is zoned for Corridor 6. It's close to several major bus stops. So it's an appropriate place for density to be located, and just for the public, the city is out of the business of pushing for more parking. If anything, we push for less parking when we can to reduce traffic and to meet our climate goals for the city. I also don't feel like we should push for a fence. As a policy matter, I would support changing our setback requirements so that a building like this could be on this location. However, I don't see the practical difficulty to justify them in this case with the policies that we have on the books. The proposed practical difficulty that the applicant suggested could apply to literally any lot in the city, because every lot, isn't combined with the lots that are next to it. So it just seems like an unviable practical difficulty. So with that, I share the same opinion as the staff and would move the staff recommendation.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Ford, go ahead.
I'd say I can concur with Commissioner Maya, and it's a handsome building and providing wonderful services, but the difficulties that the developer has here are ones that he has chosen and has caused himself, and he could build a smaller building that will comply. So I agree, we can't, I think we cannot find a difficulty that's not
Commissioner Alper?
Yeah, I guess I have a question for staff about this project. Because if the length is reduced, then the interior yard setback of 7 feet would be allowable.
Correct.
Right?
Yep. So the if the building exceeds 75% of the depth of the lot, then you have to increase the side yard setbacks by 2 feet on each side. So if the building is not exceeding, then the 7-foot setbacks would be appropriate here.
Okay. And the height doesn't play into that.
Well, so setbacks are determined by the height of the building. So they do play in a little bit in that there are, different brackets of height that result in different side yard setback requirements. So the height alone would result in a 7-foot interior side yard setback on each side. A 6-story building, because it would likely be more than, I think it's 53 feet, would probably have the go-to setbacks of 9 feet, right? Because it would be going up into that next bracket. So where this building falls in terms of the height in feet, it would have 7-foot setbacks. And that's only increased because of the depth, because of how deep the building is.
Okay. So is this an example, just for my own education, of something that was brought up to us during the zoning code? I'm going to look into that.
I believe that provision was adopted when built form overlay districts were adopted in, I believe, 2021. So that would have been a provision that would have been part of that whole package that would have come through at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'll say I agree with Commissioner Meyer, but I hope that you can make it work with the setbacks that we require. All right, any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Alper.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Emmerich is absent. Ford.
Aye.
Meyer.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
That's 5 yeas and 0 nays.
All right, that motion passes. That completes our last item for the evening. Are there any announcements from staff?
No announcements.
All right. Anything else from the commission?
Lindsay do wrong, but she ended up being first and last on the agenda.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. All right.
Thank you.
Without objection, I'll declare this meeting adjourned. Our next meeting is Monday, August 14th, and our next committee of the whole will be this Thursday, August 3rd at 4:30. Thank you.
Rich compost pulls carbon out of the air and into the soil, where it restores soil health, increases plant growth, and makes plants more resistant to drought.
The Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community is partnering with Minneapolis by adding biochar to their compost that will be used for their landscape project